And that's our song. Welcome to Cinematographologically Speaking. My name is Troy.
My name is John.
My name is Steven.
My name is Brody.
And today we are talking about Ingmar Bergman's From the Life of the Marionettes 1980 film set in Germany after leaving Sweden with the whole tax exile thing. Awesome. All right, we'll get preliminary thoughts and we'll go from there, I guess. I'll start. I like this movie a lot. I think it's really good. I think it's Bergman's most dialogue-heavy film that I'm aware of, which is fitting given the content. And definitely, I like this movie a lot.
Yeah, you should have in the intro. You should have said that it's his most underrated.
I think this is his most underrated film of the films I've seen. I don't know if there's some 1930s whatever I haven't seen yet, and it's the best. But
it's some underground shit.
Yeah, but people really seem to not care about this movie, which is crazy to me. I think he even has said somewhere that he thinks it's one of his best efforts.
I really like the film. It's very intense. Obviously super dense, and this is the third time I've seen it in the past few months.
Wow. Do you feel like you gained another layer of appreciation on this viewing?
Maybe. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think so. I don't know. I don't have a lot of new ideas about it or whatever, but it's just as good as it was. I mean, especially just the opening scene and the closing scene that repeat, or run into each other.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, I had a lot more appreciation for because the first time you watch it, you're you're super excited every time there's new information about what happened, And the second time I viewed it, I had a little bit more of that kind of complete viewing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was really good. Just as good the third time.
I thought the movie was pretty good. It did not blow me away, but certainly was good.
Yeah, I wasn't exactly sold on this movie. I think there are some interesting aspects, some interesting parts, and I think that there is this conversation could either flip me to a very positive viewing of this movie, or me actually thinking it's even worse than I thought it could have been. I got this feeling. I wish I was even I had big brain psychoanalytic knowledge, because I got this feeling watching the movie that this was baby's first reading of psychoanalysis, and then he just made a movie. You read some synopsis of Freud.
How dare you?
So I know, but I can't even say that because the only thing I've ever read is a synopsis of Freud.
Says baby.
So, I'm baby. So, but we'll see. Maybe it'll be unveiled to me that this is actually a genius masterpiece.
Okay, well, it's definitely a genius's masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, for all the crowd listening right now, I'm a big Bergman simp.
Big Bergman baby.
I'm a big Bergman baby, boss baby.
You're Bergman.
I'm big Bergman.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty offended at any implication that Bergman isn't a million times the man you'll ever be.
No, that's fair. No, that's fair. That's fair.
Okay.
Bergman's clearly a suit. It comes through in all of his films.
It comes through the imagery.
It practically bleeds through the screen.
Okay, well, I've got something I could start us with.
All right.
Here's a little here's a story about the film. Some kind of telling. So we've got Peter Eggerman. Peter I can't do it. Peter Eggerman, who's got a dominant mother and poor contact with the father, resulting in a latent homosexuality that Peter Eggerman himself was hardly aware of, but which of course interfered with his relationship to his wife and other women. This fact and an aggressiveness towards his dominant mother, transformed into fear, didn't find a natural outlet in Peter Eggerman's social environment, where every kind of emotional outburst is considered almost obscene. For that reason, early on, Peter became estranged from his emotional life. Instead of being himself, he adopted attitudes and played the role that education and environment had assigned to him. A strongly developed sense of duty, in connection with self-discipline, practiced from childhood on, and considerable social success, prevented the patient from naturally acting out his emotions in any way. Obviously, he was also very attached to his wife, who, like his mother, has a possessive and strong-willed personality. The inexplicable fear and the fear of that fear were ritualized into a closed social model where a certain consumption of narcotics and alcohol is not only accepted but a recommended emergency exit. I dare say that nothing would have happened if Peter Eggerman had stayed in his milieu. The disaster starts the moment he comes into contact with the prostitute. Suddenly, everything is possible. The triggering impulse might have been something trivial, a word, a gesture, a tone of voice. The girl is murdered in a moment of emotional blackout, and in a presumably ecstatic moment. Peter Eggerman performs sexual intercourse with the dead woman. His emotions break free like an avalanche. Only someone you've killed can be possessed, or rather fully controlled. The patient has broken through all social and emotional barriers and is therefore at risk of suicide, according to the same norm I have just formulated. Only someone who kills himself possesses himself entirely. So obviously, this is the final chapter, or before the epilogue, where it's Mogens Jensen, professor of psychiatry, dictates a preliminary summary. I'm wondering if you guys, how you felt about this summary in terms of its accuracy, and like, I think this is a really important moment, and like maybe we could talk about it before I unleash a storm of wisdom and truth.
Wow.
I don't know. I think
that.
What?
I'm looking forward to your wisdom and truth.
Okay, well, I'll just say I think it's not really. I just think I love this section. It's like, given a film that I see is like totally focused on communication, like this is, when you see this, it doesn't seem that inaccurate, and it seems a totally plausible telling, although the psychiatrist character isn't exactly super likable. But I think it strikes the viewer in a sort of distasteful way, where you see like, well, I just watched the story that you just tried to summarize, and there's clearly a lot more going on, and blah 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 blah, and just sort of this we're like the psychiatrist, his retelling might imply like the summary and the film are somewhat synonymous. Like just likening the film to a story. Like the film is itself like a reductive telling of some story, just as the psychiatrist summary is a reductive telling of the same story.
Right.
And like just trying to hammer home this like inexplicability, or this inexplicably mysterious nature of communication and things like this.
Yeah, and I think that was my interpretation of the last scene as well, and that, like I was thinking of the title a lot, From the Life of the Marionettes, and the way that the psychiatrist is retelling the story, and the way that he kept repeating, all paths are blocked, or all paths
are barred.
All paths are barred. Like hammering home the narrative that, like, it's all like sort of deterministic, and I think that like the way that the film was laid out, and it's like non-chronological telling, like to me that also showed like you as a viewer are watching something that already what's about to happen, so it almost becomes like deterministic from a viewer's perspective. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like you see the killing, and so then everything that happens before it is some kind of inevitable,
right,
like piece towards
exactly,
or some piece towards the inevitable.
Yeah. And I couldn't really get a grasp on exactly if this was a criticism of that sort of viewpoint, or maybe I don't know, in support of that viewpoint. I couldn't tell.
Like, I think we're definitely that's gonna be a huge chunk of discussion. Obviously, a lot to say. Steven, you have something?
Well, the repetition of the term bard immediately brings to mind the bard subject, which is a Lacanian idea and a psychoanalytic idea. And as a chip in the armor's Reddit comment says, the bard subject emerges when primitive needs get parsed into demand, which instantiates desire for what is undemandable. The bard other emerges when the subject discovers that it too lacks the phallus. And there's certainly tons of recognition of that one lacks the phallus throughout the whole film. But I think that obviously to ascribe it an analytic lens, a psychoanalytic lens, is to, in some sense, fall into the same trap as the psychiatrist. It also reminds me of the Borges's has a quote where it's like psychoanalysis is like the I don't know, it's like the gross religion of our times, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I don't think he means that simply that people believe in it or something like that, or that people adopt it like an ideology. I think it is because it seeks to provide answers to things that are unanswerable.
Right.
And yeah, so I'm not sure what route we want to take when talking about the movie. My mind immediately drifts towards psychoanalytic things, but I also think that would be relatively boring or obvious.
Well, can you quickly just define the bard individual in a more normie language? Because I might want to try and incorporate it, but the definition was pretty dense.
So no, I probably couldn't. So the bard
It's too
subject,
esoteric for you, bud.
the bard subject is here. You want to hear Hakutins? This is another attempt. Here's another attempt.
Okay.
The subject being between something and nothing. I think other ideas that are locked in or intertwined with it are the idea of eternal repetition in the desire cycle. So there, when you think of the bard subject and you think of Lacan, you think of how desire is it's impossible to actually meet one's fantasy and things like that, and that desire works in a circumambulatory way. And so the bard subject is some sort of I don't know, recognition that the subject is torn between both the other, which is the master signifier, which is the thing which you constantly look to provide a language for what you want. So when you think you want something, you appeal to this ethereal thing which you cannot actually put into language, and you ask of it to give you something in language. That's how all language functions. And there's some sort of lack built into language. Okay, and in communication, there's this emptiness that your language comes from ultimately. And that's what the bard subject is, this idea that this subject is eternally barred from having access to the other being not a person, not an entity, but this thing which delivers all of your forms of signification. So whatever has meaning to you is coming from an ultimately unreducible thing. You will constantly make appeals to it, and it's one reason why desire constantly has to work around something, because you actually can never even have access to the thing that you desire, and that's a language constraint, but also a subjectivity constraint.
So
does that make more sense?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense, and seems super on the nose here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it. I mean, if I'm understanding correctly, it's played out by Peter and Katerina's conversation about everything they're doing seeming staged and rehearsed and things like this, right? And that there's clearly real love and feeling between them, but everything that they do, there's some kind of lack of ability to communicate that clearly. And then this is also and Peter, he when they're in the bed in that one scene near the end, and he kind of points out the futility of it or something, and says that, and he basically like disavows the desire like cycle that they've played through as being meaningless, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Which yeah, I mean that's yeah.
What I was firstly, raising my hands, yielding to, I want to be honest about, the potential of misinterpretation on my end of all of this. This is my best attempt. As far as describing what the BART subject is, this is just me, like, maybe perhaps I've gotten some things wrong to any of you listeners out there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you don't.
One
The
day in the
listeners are
future.
listeners are gonna hold your feet to the fire on
20,
this
ye-
one.
20 years from now, when I'm a fucking professor, and people look at my 20-year-old self, they're gonna freak out about how stupid I was and misinformed. But I think that this was real. I don't know. I think this is accurate.
Oh, good.
But, and I do want to say one other thing. I think, though it is a more enjoyable form of psychoanalysis, it is a more enjoyable lens, Lacan, because it allows you to talk about things like this. It allows you to talk about like futility of language. I don't know, like the primacy of like desire and like fantasy and things like this from a more like affective, subjective approach. Whereas other psychoanalysis schools are like very cold, very much like the psychiatrist at the end who gives you this very curt summary of what's going on. But they may both fall prey to the same problem, and that is like like we're talking about their problems, trying to assign some sort of system or logic to them. And even if you create a more honest system which incorporates the futility of language or something like that, there is still something being lost, like some emotive aspect that we feel when we're watching. So I'm worried about even bringing that to the table, and I'm interested to hear what you guys thought on your first viewings and stuff like that.
Actually, never mind. What I'm about to say is like along the same line, but not directly a response. I just want to talk about the psychiatrist and kind of his view. So if anybody has something to say like more directly about.
Well, I mean, to respond to the question, my first viewing, I remember being just enthralled with absolute anxiety. I think this is one of my favorite anxiety core films. Anxiety pilled, anxiety based. So good, dude. I love when he's on the bed. The first time we see him having trouble sleeping. Or, no. The first dream he describes wherein it's a dream sequence, but he's describing to the psychiatrist in the beginning of the film how he will kill Katerina. And he's like lying there and his face is like sleeping, but his body is all sweaty and his heart is beating hard and you can see the pulse in his neck and stuff. And all these like really good, I just thought it was a really good, like both representation and discussion, and we'll get to that I guess later, but of like the depressive, anxious state, and like obviously the language and all that figures in this type of marionettes and blah blah blah. But that, I mean, in terms of my first viewing, I loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely like emotionally like enthralled by it. I guess is more response. Just yeah, I mean, I was definitely like seriously emotionally engaged in everything that was going on and kind of immersed in the same way that like that I am with most Bergman films or watching like any good film. But I mean, yeah, and then it made like the psychiatrist's like perspective on it like more like the more emotionally engaged I became with it, I can see that as being like how offended I was by his kind of cold interpretation. But also what's great about it is that it feels so perfectly accurate. Like it feels like such like a perfectly accurate explanation, which makes it so it's not just like, I mean, it's not just some kind of like it's not like the film is some kind of like totally all-encompassing condemning criticism of the psychiatrist's view, because it's extremely compelling, but the fact that they seem incompatible and like create that kind of tension in your viewing of the film, I think is so good.
Right. It would be very underwhelming if the psychiatrist's case seemed wrong, and then it would feel like a a very shoehorned like criticism of psychiatry, whereas this is clearly more subtle, and I think ultimately is potentially like a criticism of like psychiatry, or like not psychiatry itself, but like a, I don't know, like an analytical lens on human condition or something like that.
Yeah.
I think ultimately it comes across that way, but the only reason it's able to without you scoffing at it is because it's a very compelling case, you know. And I like that, yeah. A more subtle middle finger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, or to me, like the middle finger is like the explanation of human behavior, or more specifically, like the explanation of like wrong or bad human or sickly human behavior, and like what the ultimate causes for those things are. And at that point, you know, that's where I see like the idea that like psychoanalysis as like being a religion is like being able to explain what you cannot. I think really it really showed through in that scene in particular.
With his something that's kind of interesting about his like that explanation, and also how he addresses Peter throughout and how he talks about Peter, is there's kind of this weird like acknowledgement of his subjectivity, but it seems almost like it seems like his definition of subjectivity that he's acknowledging that Peter has or something is a much more limited definition than what the film seems to like give you as being like what the human soul is or something like that. And so with his explanation, I think why it feels off is because it's like it's, I mean, I don't remember the exact wording, I know we just read it, but there's like an acknowledgement of his subjectivity. It's not just like, let me explain exactly why you're like this way because of material conditions. It's some kind of like materialism that includes some kind of conception of like the soul, but not giving it its real weight or something like that. Which I think is why it works. Which I think is why the argument that he puts forth or whatever, his explanation, what's kind of crazy about how it's still so compelling is because throughout the film, all 3 times I watched it, I was really annoyed by his dismissiveness of Peter, you know, and his problems and his subjectivity or whatever. So when he gets to his explanation, it's crazy that it's being delivered by him, this guy who I've developed basically zero trust in as being like a reliable source of understanding Peter, and yet I'm still compelled by it.
Right.
Yeah, he definitely rides a line of like respectability and like being super annoying.
Yeah. And I think he, you know, that when he's trying early on, when he's trying to elope or convince Katerina to elope with him to Tanzania or whatever.
Yeah.
Like
Tunisia.
prior, you know, what's up?
Tunisia.
Tunisia. Oh yeah.
I don't know how to say it.
Tunisia?
Come with me.
Something like that. You know, just before that, we get this very cold psychiatrist, and you know, you can, and depending on what type of person you are, when you're watching, you're thinking like, whoa, like, kind of bad boy psychiatrist. He's gonna indulge his fantasies and then squash him like that. Whoa, what's he gonna do next Thursday? You know, this is crazy. There's some sort of like coolness to how quickly he dismisses the fantasy. You know, obviously we see that as like, we're given this alternative perspective because we already know he's killed somebody.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, we know it's real.
Earlier, before. So like clearly we see a failing the psychiatrist immediately, but we also don't know his plan. We don't know, like, you know, he comes across as like he has a plan for how he's going to deal with his patient's fantasies and things like that. And like, for instance, I really thought that we were going to get another psychiatrist appointment next Thursday and there was going to be some crazy thing, but we didn't really. But then all of that is undermined. All of his sense of a plan is undermined as soon as, you know, he's flirting with his wife. You know, when the dude's like is put in this cuckold position. You know, where he also, there's lots of scenes where he's looking, you know, through a frame or through a hole to see something. And it's oftentimes to see something he desires, or through through the panes of a window to see his wife's silhouette, combing her hair and things like that. And I see all of that as like very like cuckold like imagery, but not like in the sense like he enjoys it that way, but more like that's how desire like has to function. Is like this kind of is through a lens that bars you from it.
Yeah, just disconnect.
Yeah, right. But back to the point, like I did see like the psychiatrist wanting to elope and totally undermines himself as he's unbuttoning his shirt and stuff, and he just turns into this sleazy guy, and then though Katerina at least sees through and says something along the lines of like, whether consciously or unconsciously, you're just trying to
Unveil.
like get to me, or like trying to get in my pants.
Unveil.
Was it
Unveil?
Yeah.
She suspects he's trying to unveil the relationship between her and Peter.
And I thought that was, and that was such choice wording because
so good.
clearly this is meant to be what it is to unveil a relationship. Oh my god!
Dude.
So like if you say to unravel a relationship, that would be more like on the nose, obvious sense.
Yeah.
But it actually would be less correct. Because what's at work here in the nature of desire is the veil. The veil is the thing which provides the desire. The pane in front of the window for the bathroom, all of these like series of holes that he's looking through. There's various shots where it's a frame. He's looking within a peephole essentially. To unveil it would actually be to ruin it. And I think that's pretty interesting, as opposed to like unravel. I didn't actually think about that. I even thought to myself in the movie, like, why do they choose the word unveil there? Like, is that a mistranslation? Wouldn't we want to use like unravel or ruin or, break apart?
Yeah.
Like, why unveil? But it actually makes complete sense in this reading, I think.
Yeah, totally.
Anyways.
Totally agree. I'm trying to think about the first psychiatry scene. I don't know, yeah, you're definitely flipping. There's a lot of flip-flops with respect to the psychiatrist, especially in the first scene. But like at first, I was suspecting like, oh, this is gonna be some kind of like Robin Williams teacher moment, where he's like
exactly.
being faux tough on him, but then it's all part of the plan. But then like the strategy he employs next, where like he gets Peter to start to fantasize about the murder, and then right when he gets some crucial point, he attempts to like squash it with some type of well, that's just fantasy, and the reality is it's going to be really gross and stinky.
Yeah, it's gross and bloody.
And that just talking about blood.
It takes a long time for them to die.
Yeah, and I don't know about me, or I don't know about you, but I do know about me, and it seemed a little like, oh, what? This is kind of too obvious. Like, this is a little bit cringe. He does seem to kind of, her unveil comment is accurate, because I do sense that he is concerned about the situation. The opening lines of the film, here we go. I'm tired, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so opening lines are first, is Peter saying, I'm tired. And then she says, now you shall sleep. And she starts to like touch his face, which is like a huge Bergman motif. Like I swear every Bergman film, there's like this really light face touching. And it's all this crazy thing, like cries and whispers, shame, whatever. All the good ones have face touching. There's also another recurring thing we have to get to where Tim, my main guy who I love. There is so much to talk about here, because Tim's interview / interrogation thing is so interesting. But another Bergman motif is like when Tim asks Katerina to touch his hand to her face, and he asks her, "Do you feel my hand?" "Yes." "But can you sense that it is me?" And she's confused. That situation, she does no yes, and then kind of diagonal up and down. Anyway, that exact situation occurs in like, I swear, at least 5 other Bergman films. Anyway, sorry, the guy says it opens up, and it's like, I think it was 5 a.m. or just after 5. I had just gotten up and gone to the hall to pick up the newspaper, and then he kind of brags, I'm an early riser. When the phone rang, anyway, he picks up the he shoots over there ASAP at 5 a.m. Peter Egerman's telling him, hey, you should come here. And he, zips on over, right? Even though I think he starts it off with saying like, he acts like he doesn't really care. He's not super bothered or whatever. But if someone calls you at 5 a.m. with some cryptic like, hey, you should go here, and you zoom over there, like he obviously knew something was going on, This is just to like grant some kind of credence to like his concern he's expressing to Katerina. and she sort of says, she accuses him of this, unveiling of their relationship, which is also probably true.
Right.
But I'm just saying,
Yeah.
blah blah
I mean,
blah.
in that conversation, he says that like reasonably he should not be concerned, but like he has some kind of intuitive
His intuition.
notion that his intuition or whatever, and he says, well, my intuition is never wrong or whatever, and then so I mean, I think he's definitely like actually concerned, but he's like trying to play hardball or whatever with Peter, and like it clearly doesn't work, obviously, because he kills the girl, but like back to what you were saying with like when he's describing, he like asks him to fantasize about killing her or whatever, and then he cuts him off and is just like, well, there's blood and it smells bad. It comes off like, I mean, if you were to imagine that going well, he'd like maybe lead him into those conclusions himself or something, but instead he just cuts him off and just tells him directly like, this is not what you think it is, which is like, I don't know. I mean, that statement in itself is some kind of denying of his like subjectivity or whatever, like just accept this. And then right after that, he's like, we can take you into the psych ward and we can pump you full of drugs or whatever, and then you won't care if you're Peter Eggerman or the Emperor of China. And which I can't tell if he's like, I mean, he's kind of making a joke, but I can't tell if he like actually feels as though that's like a viable solution or something. Some kind of like,
I felt like it was.
Like he was providing as an actual solution, or he's just kidding?
Taking his fears seriously. He's like, he's like, you don't take your own fears seriously, blah blah. And I don't know. I got the sense it's a real offer. It's like, look, if you seriously think you're gonna kill Katerina, and you really don't want that to happen, I can make it happen. I'll delete you. Like, I'll turn you into nothing, and I mean, it's not super persuasive.
I mean, but yeah, he's like saying it to like scare him into like,
do you respect your own fears?
Yeah.
No, but you said that you thought it was a real offer, and I think that's not correct.
You don't think it's a real offer?
Yeah, it's like he's like doing it to like scare him or whatever, right?
Right. I mean, could it be done? Sure, it's a real offer insofar as like the cliche, the classic example where it's like you can come with me and face your, like, say like a parent says this, you can come with me and we can go do this thing that makes you anxious, or you can just stay home. You can just stay home and lay in bed.
Yeah.
You can just stay home and do this thing. And so there's clearly both options, and it's not just like, and it's more subtle than this example I just contrived. But there's clearly like a motive towards he says this as a means of basically barring it. Like, he's saying this as a means of presenting it as a potential, but then it immediately becomes, by like the way it's been said in its context, like not actually an option.
Yeah, that was my
that's what I'm saying. It's like I'm saying it's a real offer, but really it's a like presenting of a non-choice, and like really just hammers home this like all paths are barred sense, where it's like in terms of Peter's perspective, he's either going to kill his wife, or he sees himself as heading down this road where he's going to either kill his wife or basically commit suicide, pharmaceutically or not, which makes it interesting that he doesn't kill his wife. Oh, dude, I want to talk about whatever.
But I think that back to like the point with talking about, I don't know, there's like a lot of discussions about like the soul or whatever, and like Katerina talks about like neglecting her soul and things.
Her soul starts to scream.
Yeah, her soul starts to scream because she like neglects it and like kind of denies its existence. And then I don't know, the thing is that conversation that's taking place in, it's so crazy because like all of this kind of acknowledging of subjectivity is like contingent on like some kind of acknowledgement of your own subjectivity or something like this, and they're like, that conversation, this third time I watched it especially, I think the first time I watched it I was kind of confused by the way the conversation flowed. Like, it seemed to get really serious and then the other person wouldn't interact, and what happens during that scene is so crazy because they kind of get very serious but don't really listen to one another. Like, they kind of do, and then Tim like forces this like communicate with me like gesture or something when he like has her place his hand on her cheek and like forces her into like recognizing whether he's there or not or whatever, which like I yeah, I mean I think it's just kind of telling how she's like talking about her like her soul screaming and such, and then she kind of dismisses it, and then the conversation moves on. And so then when she comes to this point where she's like actually made to confront that, or like some kind of real emotional connection, she's confused. And I think that like her nodding and then shaking the head, what I read it as this time was something more like she was trying to like first kind of give him what he wanted or something, like what he was asking her for, and then like being confused about whether she should answer honestly or whether she could answer honestly or something about whether she feels that it's him or something. And that like I don't know, I mean it's just such a good like physical moment like illustrating this problem of her like inability to connect.
Yeah, it definitely hammers home the idea of like it introduces the flesh, which is like a constantly reoccurring topic of like this sort of dissonance or like incompatibility with the soul and the flesh or the body. And yeah, I mean maybe if we want to talk about that we can. And then just to bolster your point just a little more, like yeah, like I think Tim is actually he's a listener and he's a talker. You know, she's the one who's not, you know, only passively listens at times. You know, she finds herself sort of enthralled by his own discussion of his face in the mirror. And yeah, he literally talks to himself in the mirror. Like he talks to her, then turns back to himself and turns back to her and talks back to himself. And there's this whole thing. But yeah, this kind of like he tries to bridge the gap. Like there's just lots of discussion. I mean, let me know if you guys know what I'm talking about. Like a lot of discussions about the body and the soul within and things like this. And anyway, and he tries to bridge the gap, and she's like you're saying, like I think she sort of realizes the problem he's getting at. Yeah,
I think that moment is like one of the few moments of like real intimacy or attempts at intimacy, because it's like forced or whatever. And I don't know about you guys, but throughout the whole film, I was shocked at everyone's dismissiveness. And one scene in particular is when the whole like thing where he's gonna jump off the roof, yeah. And that guy comes over, and the guy seems so like nonchalant about it, you know? And then they're like arguing, and he's like kind of like choking her on the ground, like yelling at her or whatever. And then the guy's like, just take a shower, like just take a shower, drink some coffee, like you got to be somewhere at 10 a.m. like it's all fine, you know. And so I think that there's like I mean, and there's also something else to talk about, the whole like audience type thing, like where they talk about performing and how it's like terrible that there's never an audience or something like this. And so but yeah, my point being is that yeah, throughout the film there's all these moments of everybody being completely dismissive of like the turmoil of Katerina and Peter's like inner lives or whatever, and like suggesting like kind of banal like material solutions.
But to some sense, like I feel like I can't blame people for like not taking it seriously, because when you're sort of threatening to jump off the roof, and then they come back and then they have that little childish squabble, like to me it almost seemed like they go through this all the time. Like the threat wasn't real to begin with, and it was almost an attempt to like, I don't know, like gain pity or you know like how it can be when you're just, you know, having like some sort of like childish like conflict, and then, you know, there's maybe something to be said about like conflict in relationships and like how they're almost like necessary or something like that. But go ahead, Steven.
Well, so it clearly renders him extremely impotent. So like when he is standing on the edge, like contemplating suicide or whatever, like this is all in some can be read in some sense like an attempt to gain, I don't know, whatever power. But when we say power, like it's not just pity. I think that it's directly related to the lines associated with like potency and sexual potency, which come during that conversation. She like mocks him,
Mm-hmm.
and when he pins her to the floor, the fact that there's no reaction serves to make him even more impotent, because like you'd imagine like if he truly posed a threat to her, that guy would get
Mhm.
involved. He would pull
Mhm.
him off. And so like this guy, Peter's feeling like truly impotent by after all this because his suicide attempt doesn't work either.
Yeah.
And they the guy my favorite line from that one guy was like you've had your moment. I think he says something like you've already
Yeah.
had your
Yeah.
outburst
Yeah.
or
Yeah. Yeah.
something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
thought
Yeah.
that was really good.
And he also says it would be honorable to jump. Like he
Yeah.
mocks him. He mocks him before he's decided not to jump. That he's
Mhm.
not going to. You know.
He says,
Like.
it is absolutely honorable to jump, but it's inhuman to torture one's fellow man.
Yeah. I don't know. It's so crazy because like. It's crazy because we've seen him kill someone in the first
Yeah.
like 2
Yeah.
minutes,
Yeah,
you
he
know.
says-
So like
yeah.
everything,
So that having all
everything
that
we're viewing it
contextualized.
through the lens of like the actual, like what's actually at stake
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
or something like
Wait,
that.
is
And
this-
so
Is
Can
this
you
the
read that line
real?
again?
Is this the real Joker?
Can you read that line again, Troy?
Is this the true incel rise? Yeah. He says, it is absolutely honorable to jump, but it's inhuman to torture one's fellow man.
Dude, in neither case does he have any agency. If he does the honorable thing, like honor is tied to this like social this like social idea of what is honorable. And in the
Yeah.
case where he hurts other people, in neither case is it about his own subjectivity. That's so funny.
yeah,
Like no
yeah.
matter what choice he makes, it's for someone else and not him.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
like everything about the scene is so castrating.
And then later, he
Yeah.
says, "Shut up, Peter. You had your scene already."
But
And that's why
Yeah.
and that is like one reason why there's like an extreme bar on him is that there is no route where he actually attains some level of like efficacy or something like that, potency.
Yeah.
Like and even in the fantasy of clearly his fantasy is gaining potency by killing his wife or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But like there's literally no avenue that's presented to him, in life or like in that situation where he
But-
can adopt some sort of agency.
But in the following scene when they're in bed together and Katerina is like sulking, wouldn't you say that at that moment like he is in the position of power when he's like totally shucking her off?
He tries to, yeah, that's like his
Yeah.
final attempt. But I don't think he's actually in any sort of position of power.
Well,
I don't know.
I think it's an interesting
Well,
conversation.
it's like-
in bed.
He's only this is the thing. He's only in a position of power because Katerina has made the choice to be submissive. Like she's kind of claiming her own like power in the relationship by being submissive.
Through his acknowledgement of her attempt to do that through the play is then again an attempt to to remain in the powerful position, and that's
Right.
why that's why I still see the scene as like him actually is in power in that.
I mean, I think it's super futile.
No,
I
yeah,
think
it's
you're
all
right
about-
that's a final attempt, but it's clearly like, dude, he's pathetic, dude. He's reading in bed. His wife's like fucking crying after he just tried to commit suicide. He's trying to say he's essentially above it all. Like, I think we're not meant to leave the scene feeling like he's in charge of something, although he's trying desperately to do something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I don't-
and
I don't. Yeah,
Go ahead.
it's pure futility. He is so trapped. I mean, yeah, his
Right,
whole
it's apathy.
yeah, his whole
right,
conversation is like, she
Yeah,
says something that sounds super heartfelt. What do you think? I'm thinking you're playing the record with the refrain. It was all my fault. Forgive me, my love. Whoever puts on that record first gets to be the best person. So they play this game, and she's like all torn up, and he says this incredible line, which I think lines up with the chess in the end. He says, "Remember the beginning of our marriage? How we tried?" Or that's what she says, and he said, "We had capital then, capital in love, if you will. We've squandered it all and didn't get anything new. You know why? We accepted the rules of the game without any talent for playing it. We were cheated." And then he talks about how like once he gets old and can't do anything, blah blah blah. Anyway, but yeah, it's like basically he says, we can't talk to each other. Like, we're totally unable to do it. We cannot connect, and anything we say is just a weapon later. Blah 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 blah. He's yeah.
Right. And so I think though you could read the scene where he gains some level of power over her, maybe, I don't know, or something similar to that. I think ultimately though what's important to hammer home is he's not attempting to gain potency like about her. Like his desire for like agency is about this third object, this like big other, this feeling of extreme like she's simply like a representation of it, and like so becomes like metonymically linked with like this to kill her would be to appeal to this third thing and show this third thing, which is the other God, this ethereal impossibility or something like that. To kill her would be to prove one's agency for it. And I think at the end when he's reading and he's all apathetic, it really is like a submission to this big daddy, to this third thing. And so like it's not really like a him versus her power struggle. It is much more him versus third thing, and then various things standing for that.
But he definitely
it's not a power struggle also because she's already submitted. Like she has like of her own will become powerless. You know what I mean? Like so she's the one expressing some kind of real autonomy in that situation.
Well, within the frame of the
that
game,
he can't have.
Right. Within the frame of the game, she has, subdued herself, but he is refusing to play. He wants to, his battle is with the game itself, or with this like third, this more meta game situation. But I just want to say also, I think there is this third thing, right? And there is a much more broad like agency issue at hand. I mean, all paths are barred. But I do think there's something very relationship oriented in like to love one another. And like they come closer together, and she talks about how she carries him inside her, and like they want just this constant like almost visual idea of connection, but the body, like Tim talks about, where he says he's obsessed with being close to someone, and by close he means extremely, and the body itself is a barrier. Like he wants to merge souls or whatever, and Peter and Katerina both want to possess each other in this like totally unifying way, but cannot do it, and then. I think this situation in which they cannot, this communicative thing is the thing that Peter is he resigns out of the attempt and into the battle with this connective issue.
Well, the connective issue I think you're correct in that, but I think the connective issue is like the nature of subjectivity, like the third thing. That's what I'm talking about. Well, that very thing. Yeah, right.
The communicative, the communicative, the connective.
Right. So I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. I just want to throw in, it's not just this other thing. Like I think we have the sense he really does want her.
Oh,
and she
yeah, of course.
Obviously like they both are just fucking crazy for each other.
Of course, yeah. But the greater problem that emerges is
it becomes abstracted and abstracted.
Yeah.
Oh. And then this poor prostitute, Ka.
Yeah.
Katerina.
Dude, the first. I mean, tell me if I'm wrong here, but I feel as though like the whole prostitution like sequence or whatever is like, I mean, it becomes some kind of like miniature of his life, like there's a whole like all paths are bars thing, and he's like trying to like get out, and like her name's literally Katerina, and like he's like trying to get out and all the doors are locked, and then he's forced into this situation where he has to where he can't claim any kind of autonomy, and and she is totally, she like goes to comfort him,
She's really nice.
Like she's totally submissive. She does what he asks her to, and then he and then she tries to like be actually like empathetic, like truly empathetic, and then he just
I think there's something to be said, like, because like they're in a setting that's very like fantasy like it's the only part that's in color. It is
to stage.
Like there's sort of I was just about to say that there's a stage. Prostitutes is sort of like a the whorehouse is a bit like a fantasy land type atmosphere, and then so everything is then set for him to play out this fantasy. Yeah, and he just
Right.
loses control.
And then she even says like, "Now you sleep" or something like that, and then it begins, right?
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
he has like
Where he
he's
touches
entering
her.
and he's about to
Or she
indulge.
touches
Mm.
Yeah.
I think it's all about the
Mhm.
touch, the thing that sets him
Yeah.
off as the psychiatrist.
Well, yeah.
But yeah, and he doesn't
But the-
want. Well,
yeah.
yeah, I want to go slower through this whole. If we're going to talk about the thing.
No, yeah, sorry. I mean, I
Um,
just yeah.
First of all, the second prostitution place, like the second time we see it, it's in black and white, all this stuff. It's so bodily, right? It's so the first girl dancing. Now I don't know exactly what Bergman was thinking and what the social attitudes are like at the time, but she has a very like bodily body, if this makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's
Wait. Would you say are you describing the black and white portion when that it cuts to
some
not when Katerina his wife is talking to the mother, and then right before it changes to the next scene, it's It's like-
talking
it's
when
like
he
a
when he
flash
gets to the brothel. Because
And there's like the close-up shot of the body like dancing with the music.
Yeah, the opening
as it, like,
sequence is
rotates.
just the murder part, but when it opens up and him going into the brothel and it's him looking through the thing at the woman dancing, it's some third person on the stage doing a very like super unenthusiastic dance.
Mhm.
She's on her background. I'm
Yeah,
saying
it
that
didn't,
woman.
it didn't look fabulously attractive.
Yeah, it's not
and
glamorous.
I
No,
couldn't
yeah.
tell if that was like the 80s or if that was intentional.
Well, I think there's what definitely is intentional is the woman is clearly doing a job. There's clearly a disconnect between the behavior and the the person inside, right?
Mhm.
She's sort of like basically dead faced and like basically going through these like super like gyratic motions, and all this stuff. And yeah, the body is not exactly glamorously lit. You can see all these things. Anyway, so I think I think the whole part of the prostitute thing is like these are women, at least within this context, who the body has been sacrificed, right? And all they have is the soul. And so like maybe this disconnect, right? Because what he wants is to conquer, I think, a soul, because like like the body's been sacrificed as some sort of commodity, right? But the women have these souls and they're clearly disjointed, as like this first performance suggests. And also when she takes him to the stage, to copulate, and he says no, like stand over there, and he just wants to eviscerate her with his eyes, and she's like, and she's clearly uncomfortable, and he says, don't they do worse things to you? She says, this is the worst, right?
Mhm.
Because like he has crossed the threshold past the body into like the soul, the thing he's going to possess. So I'm just saying, I think like the point of why prostitute, other than this incredible, like you get this chance for an incredible setting where it's on the stage and it's this super fantasy discotheque, whatever. But just this huge disjoint between the body and soul, and like a clear indication of like what he wants to truly possess in the end. Like he can get past the body, whereas like that seems to be an issue with him and Katerina.
I agree that everything you laid out is like really striking, but like my understanding was not that he just wanted the soul. Like he really wanted a blending of the two. He wanted like total owner. Like
Yeah.
for instance, he had his wife's. In some sense, we are led to believe. Well, it kind of there's scenes which seem pretty off, but in general, I thought that we were led to believe that like he actually has her soul / she has his soul. Because remember, when they're in the psychiatrist's office, she says something like, we've cheated on each other before, but I love him. Like I give my life to him. Like he's there with me everywhere I go. Like I think is one of the lines. He's with me everywhere I go, or something like that. And so I thought that he had some level of a soul connection. And then she even says something like, and this was crazy to me. She says something like, the sex we have is like good, or something like that.
Yeah, it's the best.
She says that
cheating.
Right. And then, and then though she makes fun of him for his impotence during that one scene, she still says something like, he's made me come like 500 times, but like, or like 800 times, but 500 times I've had to fake it, or something like that.
Well,
some
and then
number.
but then the other ones were not good. They're like, oh yeah, they were fine.
Yeah,
but
I squeaked down.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
But my point simply being that the prostitute is not just meant to be this like romance or soul conquer. I think it really is like he wants to conquer a total subject. He wants her physical flesh, as well as her soul. He wants everything, and I think we get that something about that's communicated by both like having this intimate moment, and then like the fact that he has sex with her after she's dead. There's something to that as well.
Yeah, I want to totally walk it back. I think you're super right. I think my commentary is still poignant in some sense, but not to the end that I clearly made. Because, I mean, he has anal sex with her corpse. Clearly relevant. And just a dash of like, or just want to add like that the brothel, I think, is sort of aptly described by the psychiatrist as this place of all things permitted. Like, you know, he can exit the social realm like much better and become this sort of, you know, no holds barred type of thing. Pun intended.
Still barred.
What was I gonna say?
I don't know. What were you gonna say?
Well, I was just gonna say earlier on that actually never mind. I don't know if well, okay. What's up with like the whole like the whole like her being some kind of like fashion designer, you know? Because like we spend like this enormous amount of time on like this imagery of like the with the people like spinning around and stuff. It's so dreamy and so good. I don't know, something is so like mesmerizing about it. But I mean, I don't know if there's more like thematically going on about like her profession versus his profession.
Boys versus girls. Boys, they work with trucks and equipment and they make the world turn. Women, they just like clothing. No, I agree, dude. I love his, like, when we see his profession, that sequence is so awesome.
Oh, okay, wait.
It's so awesome.
Visually, something that happens that I didn't acknowledge or like notice the first two times I watched it is he starts like his kind of monologue of like these like really huge sounding negotiations or whatever.
Yeah.
And it started with like this panning up shot of this like absurdly huge building. Like I mean the shot makes it look gigantic.
Yeah.
Giant.
And then it cuts. Yeah, exactly. And then it cuts and then it's this close-up of his hands, and it's the same like panning up motion of his hands going up this lamp, and there's some kind of like massive, I mean there's this imagery of him kind of like owning this gigantic like thing and being in total control of this huge thing. And yeah, it's erotic the way he touches the lamp
to the secretary. She's writing it down.
Yeah. I mean, it's like this it's just like this, the whole scene, he comes off as extremely powerful, and it's all set up like visually. And he's dictating this thing to this woman, and it's all set up to kind of put him in like this ultimately powerful position. And yeah, the way he touches the lamp, Troy, you're saying, is like really sensual, like the way he's like touching.
What is the big brain Steven? What is the counterpart to phallic?
Well, I don't know. It's the phallus. Wow, dude.
I got you.
I don't think there's not a direct opposite.
Okay, but that's what I want to say. The lamp is like this feminine object. Both, I think, the way he touches it and kind of I don't know if this is way crazy, but the way it looks. Anyway, yeah, he's got all sorts of domination in this situation, like on some kind of economic social level. He's dominating the secretary. He's like at the peak aptitude, like he's just sitting there walking around dictating crazy complex ideas and like totally moving. You know, he's a world mover.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and he touches this lamp.
But clearly, and that's the great thing about the phallus, is it is pathetic and weak, and ultimately can be shown to be nothing more than lacking. And I think that this scene does that very well, because clearly he's in this powerful state, but we know how incredibly broken he is, and how it is all essentially like an illusion. You know, it's all a what's the word?
Facade.
Well, facade's fine. Yeah. There's like a masquerade versus something else distinction, but I'm forgetting the other one. But and it's not masquerade. But
masquerade versus
masquerade. It's imposture. He's trying to. There's something about the. So, like, you might think the feminine, maybe this is great for the distinction between the two works. The feminine, and this is like a Todd McGowan idea, the feminine is interested in the masquerade. They don't like try to. It would be like wearing a hat, okay, versus
Okay.
the imposter wears a toupee. The toupee is meant to cover up a lack, and it's meant to blend in as if nothing is wrong, and it is a mechanism of hiding. The hat, however, is a system whereby you essentially announce a potential lack, or you might embellish something that is lacking, but wear it flauntingly, and that's a more feminine approach to fashion and things like that. And yeah, it's just so I think if we think about the woman's career versus his career, I suppose okay. I actually think there's something interesting here because each of them actually adopt some position of the phallus, and maybe that's an extremely contradictory. That's maybe perhaps an extreme problem between their relationship. Right, right. Like 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 she's clearly like this, domineering, powerful woman in
Career
her
woman.
job, career woman, but also clearly in her relationship, she desires. She wants the other's desire, right? She wants something that he wants. Let me walk that back. Let me walk a lot of this back, and simply say that the building is a great demonstration of the phallus.
Okay.
We'll just say
Yeah, building looked like wiener.
nah, the whole
Well,
scene,
Wiener.
Could I also say, just to bolster the like feminine nature of the lamp or whatever? I mean, the and him touching it or whatever, is that those shots I think are called back to or reflect or are like replicated with the shots of him touching her body in the dream.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes,
I mean,
exact
he's
same.
touching it. He's touching it in the exact same way.
Yeah. I love this commentary about if there's just a gap here. This comment that Bergman maybe, okay, I generally think it's wrong to talk about, what directors say, but and we've talked about this. Brody and I have dueled over this idea, but where do we have this? Katerina has this is when they're fighting, which also, by the way, Peter kicking her in the face.
Yeah, so
Little
crazy.
baby.
It's so crazy. We sort of talked about that briefly. This is so performative. The guy is totally just an audience member. Anyway, Peter says, he's like choking her, and he says, Katerina has a lifelong contract with the objective, real truth of the world. Partly it's because she's a woman, and as such is entitled to a certain blood and soil insight. Partly it's because she's Katerina. Just this type of like Peter's disconnect from the emotional life, and like this sort of hatred or envy of Katerina's seemingly allegedly better connection, given that she's a woman. With
Well, also because I
emotional
think she
intelligence.
well, I think that she like flaunts that she's like in control and in touch with her like inner life or whatever, and like kind of waves that in front of Peter, like I have this and you don't, and then but which she clearly, she admits that she doesn't, like with the
Tim.
the main conversation is the one with Tim, with the screaming of the soul and all this.
But the same thing when they
I
have the
think this is getting more to my point with the idea that they both have the phallus. There's some but regardless of that point, I think her interactions and the way she interacts with him regarding the mother, his mother, and how she doesn't want to visit her. She's like an old lady or whatever, and things like that, and it's very important to him. There's a lot of lenses you could put on before you look at that whole situation. But I think one is actually like an extreme failing on her part to like recognize like the importance of the situation to her husband. And I think that it's a very like, I don't see that as like a traditionally like powerful, like in touch with her emotions moment. Instead, she like drinks herself. She drinks by herself until she's awakened or like called by her gay friend Tim, and then she's like forced into recognizing how she's failing as like an emotive agent, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think it can be a little bolstered by, you know, in the subsequent scene when they're in bed and she is like trying to continue to play the communication game.
Yeah.
You know, but he is like abstracted away from that. I think this could be like a little bit of her, like, you know, she's still trying to, you know, engage in the emotional life, and he's not. But yeah, I definitely agree that like the two, Katerina and him, are like, for lack of a better term, both have the phallus and like are both these sort of aggressive, like conquering people, but it just affects them differently given, you know, man and woman and things like this. And there's also something, I don't know, maybe we want to talk about all the homosexual content.
Yeah.
Like, why is it relevant that, like, well, Tim, I love Tim. He's so awesome, funny, and insightful. His interaction with the investigator, I think, is like just phenomenal. But yeah, like, why is it important that he's gay? And like, is, you know, if they both have the phallus, are you know,
well,
is Katerina, are they in a homosexual relationship like the psychiatrist sort of identifies, and Tim also basically alleges that Peter is homosexual.
I think that Tim's statement when he says something, it's not about being feminine, you know, gay, like us gays are like this, it's not about being feminine, it's about being in tune with our emotions, I think is actually like wrong. It's about them being more feminine, but whatever. But, and that's like fine. That's like still like, you know, it's not like a negative quality. And, I think him being a man and gay is important insofar as it shows like this, it shows a more, open lens or like open frame as far as male female logic, as opposed to simply just a man is a man, a woman is a woman. So clearly he adopts something similar to like a Virgin Mary idea, or like some sort of like beneficent Madonna character. And I think there's something cool about that in the sense that he is a gay man and adopts relatively feminine attributes, such as, you know, Virgin Mary attributes. And whereas I think you could make an argument that Katerina, at various times is adopting a much more like typically like male logic, masculine oriented approach to life and relationships. So I don't know. I see some sort of importance, him being a gay man, as I don't know, showing like the fluid aspect of gender and psyche or something like that.
He's a bit in like an in-between state, or like, ooh.
Do you think his like monologue in the mirror or whatever, where he talks about like, I mean, what do you think it says about him with the and like how this applies to the other characters as well? Like when he's looking in the mirror and he gives this whole speech about feeling like a child and opening his eyes and seeing, or like not just feeling like a child. He says almost like he knows that he's a child or something. And he looks in the mirror and he's not, or something like this. I mean, yeah, that's just another example, I feel like, of like the disconnect between like the soul and the material part of the subject or something like this. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't feel as though that conversation or that monologue or whatever is exclusively about Tim. You know what I mean? But I don't really know like how it applies to other people. You know what I mean?
Bro, mind-body distinction, they figured that out like 400 years ago, John. If we're interested, I can read a little bit. I think Tim gives maybe the best in-film description of the situation in his like mirror dialogue or monologue. Being close.
Yeah, not the whole thing. Just choose.
Okay, fine. I'll just choose. It is quite a
long monologue.
Well, it's so good. He talks about autonomy. He talks about the mind body. He talks about.
We should just watch the movie for the first like 2/3 of the podcast.
All right, hold on. Let me just read the movie real quick. Okay, fine. I'll just excerpts.
Yeah, pick some chunks that are juicy.
Some juicy chunks. I like when he calls himself like he's trying to reduce. When Peter in the bed, he's like saying he's trying to reduce himself to hamburger meat or something like this.
Oh yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
matches the world around him.
Yeah. Reddit movie details
So cool.
actually pointed out hamburgers come from Germany, so this is actually a subtle homage to the. Anyway, so let's see. He says, you know, I don't.
Germany.
It's aging
So did
against itself,
Nazis.
decay, forces I can't handle. You know, I'm controlled by forces I can't control. Doctors, lovers, pills, drugs, alcohol, work. Nothing helps. They're secret forces. And then he also, and I noticed that in combination. Oh, I lean towards the mirror and look into my face, which is quite familiar to me. And I noticed that combination of blood, flesh, nerves, and bone. Two completely incompatible. I don't know how to call it. Two incompatibles. The dream of closeness, tenderness, community, obliviousness of all things. And on the other side, violence, disgrace, terror, threat of death. Sometimes I believe all this has the same origin. I don't know. And he also says, like, closeness is a dream. I love, and then we have the sort of investigator interview scene. But anyway, Tim is obviously poignant.
The investigator scene I really like.
It's so funny. It's so good.
The dialogue between them is really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
at
it's
the
so
beginning.
entertaining. I love when he like tells him to turn off the recording or whatever, and then he like flips the mic around. Yeah, he like reaches forward and flips around and then puts his hand back in his lap.
It's so like
It's so
it's
funny.
such a. I'm a creative. Well, yeah, Tim is so.
Sassy gay man.
He's spicy gay man. He's so theatrical.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he's so theatrical, and it's awesome in that whole thing. And the interviewer totally becomes an audience, and I think likes it. You know, he's looking at him and he smiles, and the interviewer seems like a pretty genuinely nice guy. You know, he has to ask the questions, and he's like, "I'm sorry being rude," and Tim's like, "I'll try to believe you." You know, but then Tim like struts around, he's being all poetic, and he's like, "What's he say?" He, oh yeah, we need to ask your name to avoid mistaking you for someone else. Absolutely impossible.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so then he's like, blah blah blah. Anyway, but he's like, but that's only half the story. Like it's this, total storytelling
truth,
moment.
or, yeah.
Yeah. Was he?
Well, I like that it's so theatrical, but he comes off as being completely honest the entire time.
Yeah,
You know? So
yeah.
like, there's no way to be. You're not like annoyed with the theatrics because it seems as though he's actually trying to express something honestly and as directly as he can.
Something that might be worth pointing out is like I actually found like a really stark contrast between his monologue with Katerina and the investigator. Like something about him
Mhm.
made him seem more like powerful and more commanding.
Yeah.
And, like,
I mean,
perform-
And then the other one
because he's
seemed,
like he's
just
within
sort of like a coworker and a friend, almost like vulnerable. But here he's like, look at me, like I'll fucking tell you how it is, you know.
Yeah, he's like within his like social space, you know,
Mhm.
like he's entered into the world and like is I mean he's performing out like his role or whatever that he's defined
and
for
like
himself.
he's a
within,
big boss,
like,
which
the
I didn't
world.
really know. He's like, Tim, like that's my name, like you can't mistake
Around
me.
the
like,
world.
Yeah.
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 Well, I
My
yeah.
name's Tim.
I agree totally, except for the vulnerability. I think it's like two different versions of vulnerability because I think in the performance as it goes on, I mean, it looks like he's about to cry, and he's like,
No, yeah, it's
he's
definitely
like
still
totally
vulnerable.
he's being more honest with the investigator than he is with Katerina. He admits to wanting Peter for himself and trying to undermine the relationship and things like this. Anyway, but yeah, like the performances thing, he says so he tells the first part of basically how he ended up bringing together the prostitute Ka and Peter, and he says that's the whole story, that's the truth, yet not even half of it. I was furious with Katerina, and then he kind of does, he goes a little deeper, and he talks about how he wants to possess Peter, and he, please excuse me for putting it so dramatically. I just have a guilty conscience. I blame my homosexuality for it, but I think that's a joke.
No, yeah, it was
And
very,
then it's
like,
starting to get really
tongue-in-cheek.
interesting, don't
I
you
laughed.
think? The truth is, I wanted Peter for myself, of course, but I didn't understand that. Yeah, it's like it's almost like some kind of like CSI, like he's
Yeah.
playing this. He's playing into the whole investigated like type of thing, and he says
That's
it
what Movie
again.
Details says. an homage to CSI.
And I liked the feeling that where he talks about how, emotionally Peter was a dying man, just like a man can die from hunger, thirst, or loss of blood. I knew I could save him. I wished that he would come looking for me, that he would want to be close to me. And earlier, this language is used, I think, multiple times of like Katerina in the psychiatry office says she wants to be discovered by him, and she wants to discover him. And this type of like, once, you just imagine, some like nice guy is like, if only she knew the real me, I could save her from her, Twitch donations or something like this. It's like just some the saving thing. Anyway. Yeah, I wonder if it's true. I wonder if Tim could have saved him.
Yeah, you get the impression that like he might have been able to or something, just because like he seems so genuinely committed to it in a way that and the thing is like obviously you don't get like a ton of time with Tim, so you don't get to see if there's some kind of disconnect the same way there is with Katerina between her want to become one with Peter or whatever and her like enacting of or like kind of adoption of the phallus or whatever, which that's what I'm curious about is, do you think that like as far as like, I mean, I see Katerina's problem with like her inability to connect with Peter. I mean, is it purely this adoption of like wanting to control and things like this, like within like when they talk to each other and wanting to kind of like piss him off and take on some kind of dominant role that kind of pushes him away? Because I mean, I feel like that's kind of her main like roadblock as far as like her main internal roadblock in her ability to connect with Peter is that she like does all of this kind of like dominance, like controlling of Peter or whatever, or like trying to control Peter and piss him off, like with the saying they go to dinner and she like kind of brags about him groping her or whatever and how she like gropes this other guy like openly or whatever and like laughs about it. And then later whenever it comes to suddenly Peter will say something like about him, like in that scene in particular, he says something about being sick or something, and then she immediately like doubles down on being like genuine and like vulnerable. Like it seems like some kind of persona is like dropped or something, but she's already like dug herself too deep in this like controlling persona that she has like developed or something.
So I think that pointing out the grope thing was actually really important because I think she points that out. Like I don't know, now I feel all bad for raising the term phallus because phallus like can take on a lot of different meanings. But one meaning is not like simply control, but is to have the desire of the other. So from like a Lacanian idea. So like if the father has a phallus, the father has a penis, and the baby wants to understand what and the baby wants the mother. She becomes essentially like the big other during an infant's life. This is like the psychodevelopmental idea. And so the baby attributes the reason that the mother wants the father at some point more than the baby, or the reasons why the mother would choose time with the father over the baby or tell the baby no in preference to the father, is supposed to localize that in the phallus. And it doesn't have to be a penis, but rather it's this abstract idea of, although the penis takes on a great metaphorical link, it like clearly can represent this very well, but the phallus is simply this thing which something else has that what I want desires, or what the other desires. So, so for instance, this grope scene is actually an instance where she is trying to claim that she has what the others desire. She has the phallus, that they grope her, and she's like laughing about it like it's, like she has it. It's a very like masculine flaunting of sexuality. When a man flaunts his sexuality, you might say that he's presenting the phallus because he says something like, dude, she was all on me, dude. She saw these guns and she just wanted me, you know, and so she was rubbing me. And so like there it makes sense because what this guy has is the desire of the other, but localized in like, you know, the guns, the penis, etc., you know. But in her case it's her body, you know, because she's being groped, and so she even references the fact, and she uses it against him. She uses it as a means of like making him an impotent, putting him in an impotent position by claiming, you know, essentially she is adopting like this phallic authority, like that she has what others desire. And I think this also is really important, and I just now thought of it, the connection between Tim and her. The fact that Tim desires the same thing that she desires, and she desires what Tim desires, and that is him, and that is Peter. And there's something really funny about that dynamic, because it actually puts Peter in the position of simply like the object and what other people desire. You know, like he becomes in some sense a phallus for Tim and for her, and that each of them hopes to ultimately obtain him, and they also seek to unify themselves with him, right? But it's obviously ironic and silly because he's clearly in an impotent position, and maybe that's to convey some ultimate idea about like the extremely limited nature of the phallus, because the phallus is also often understood to be like this crazy lacking thing. The scepter, like for instance, do you think like any man's power truly comes from their penis? No. Does any man's power come from anything like the scepter, the crown? No.
Mine does.
It comes from like this. It comes from the system that subtends it, right? Yeah. It comes from the culture, everybody's ascription to value of that thing. It itself has no power in itself. Like the crown is only valuable if we give it value, you know, and things like that. So there's like the phallus is understood as inherently lacking, but even though it tries desperately not to be. But yeah. Okay.
So do you think Katerina's like main problem with like being able to connect with Peter, like outside of what Peter does to keep her from connecting, is like the adoption of this like role or whatever in the relationship?
Well, I mean, imagine your girlfriend had a penis.
Yeah, I mean, I think that plays a role. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know enough to make like a comprehensive claim about the relationship, but I do think that the fact that she seems really, I actually think she's way more interested in unifying herself with him than he is in unifying himself with her.
Yeah, because
right.
Yeah, because that's like the main thing that I've been like thinking about is that so even from the beginning when you first get introduced to her, like for reals, not in Peter's fantasy, is when she comes into the psychiatrist's office and she does this whole kind of like sexual game with him, you know, like, oh, you sleep with me? No, I won't, blah, blah, blah. And then she's extremely honest and comes off as, I mean, like totally believable that what she's saying is true about her kind of interconnectedness with Peter and want for that. And then she displays that when after they have that crazy argument where she like basically castrates him or whatever, and then they go into the bedroom and she says, I felt as though that her there, like that was the best attempt that anyone could possibly make in that situation to try to make a connection. So I feel like it's at that point that it becomes obvious that their inability to connect comes down to Peter, and that before that it was this kind of back and forth, like both of them have this issue of like limiting themselves or whatever and being able to communicate. But at that point she has kind of revealed herself to be aware of like her soul screaming and all of this and blah 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 blah. And at this point it's like there's nothing more to explain it on her end of why they're unable to communicate or like become one or whatever. And then from then on it's like it's on Peter or whatever.
Yeah, there's like some impossibility, like she can't just obtain it, like she can't just obtain him. That was her best case. I think though the point is it's not on Peter though I see what you're saying. Like she puts it like she did everything she could. She gave her best effort to plead to him. Now the ball's in his court. Unfortunately, though, as he's aptly ascertained, is that the ball is not in his court. You know, he actually has no agency. He is actually like this object adrift who is led by all these different things. You know, he's all apathetic. He's like, I can't go this way. I can't go this way. You know, whatever. And there's something kind of funny about that. If we continue to see Peter as the phallus, as the object phallus, because he, the phallus, as I said, like gains its power from the structures that subtend it, and so like it is because it is only like a symbolic sort of authority. So like when all of these constraints on his life, when he becomes aware that he is just a phallus, like he is just a symbol of authority, but not actually has no actual agency. It's almost like the phallus becoming aware of itself and its like inherent lack. And I think that is very much like his progression throughout the whole film is basically a recognition of his own eternal like lack in relation to true like power or like agency or something like that. He sees himself very much as an object, like an object to be had by her or by Tim.
Which is like when he talks about being like becoming one with like the world around him or whatever. And
right. Yeah, the world around the material world, as opposed to being a true subject that like is distinct from the world. He wants to immerse himself in the world like a hamburger patty. You know, he wants to he wants to be like part of Germany. And I think that's pretty accurate.
Just on the topic of subjectivity, I think it's relevant. Like when he describes his dream, which maybe we can talk about, and I love the dream. When he has this dream, at the end of it, right, it's very ethereal, it's very subjective, it's very like surreal, and sort of like dreams are, interpretable. Yet at the end of it, it's in the letter, and we see him talking sort of like in Winter Light. The letter is verbalized by the woman writing it. Anyway, he says, I'm not going to look up the exact words, but it's like, can you help me? Can you save me? Like what am I to do? Like, or not what am I to do? It's like, it's as if it seems clear to Peter what this means, and its like importance is evident, yet incommunicable outside of just a description of the dream, and looking to the psychiatrist to treat him. But I wonder if it seems to think like he thinks the psychiatrist will understand, or something like this, or maybe this is it's his last attempt to be saved. I don't know, I just found that interesting.
Yeah,
but also I wanted to get a quick question. Is like, right, they're all marionettes, all paths are barred, things like this. What is the who is holding the strings, so to say? Like, what is this, because I feel like it's time to get into I want to get into this, like, overarching deterministic idea that seems obviously central.
Just really quick, when he's, like, pleading or whatever, the psychiatrist in the letter, I love the way he, like, looks at the camera. Like, I don't know, it's just so desperate and so, I don't know. Like you want so bad for him to like get help or whatever, at that point.
Yeah, in contrast, a relatively reserved performance for most of the time. It's he's obviously like searing hot, but it's a very constrained face.
Yeah. It's very like weary, like like as he describes or whatever, like he's like exhausted, like he's at the very end of it, and like his pleading is like quiet, like it's not like a scream.
First words, I'm tired. I'm tired.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. We can go back to that bigger picture.
So who can, Steven? Who's holding who's the puppet master? What
yeah,
is the
I
puppet
think
master?
I think there essentially is no puppet master, right?
Yeah.
I think it is like the big other, or if you want to tailor your definition to like a very particular type of God, it's God. It's like it is impossibility, it is reality, something like that.
And
The real is
and
life itself.
And then to support that a little bit, but I'm forgetting the gay person's name. Tim, mentions what it is that he's controlled by: alcohol, pills, and then his own biology.
He adds
No,
on
no, no.
that.
He doesn't say. Okay, this is actually something I was gonna bring up earlier when Troy first brought it up. He says
I'm
like
controlled
all
by-
these forces I'm controlled by,
I'm con-
and then he states all of these things, and then he says that none of these do anything to solve the thing, which was actually, I thought, a really like clever way
Yeah, it's
of
like
like
double
wording
speak.
it or whatever, because it's implied that these are the things that are controlling him, and then he says none of these, and then he reveals that these are not the things controlling me, these are the things I tried to use to control the things that control me or whatever.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm controlled by forces I
and
can't
then-
control. Doctors, lovers, pills, drugs, alcohol, work, nothing helps. They are secret forces.
And then
Yeah,
and then Katerina in one of the earlier scenes in the movie mentions that when she's under the influence of alcohol, she's like always remains in control. And I suppose that's in the support of that same sort of idea.
Yeah, controlled by what? Perhaps because he sees her as totally out of control.
Right.
Maybe
well,
she just feels like a bag in the
you're
wind.
you're supposed to like see this as something that's like you're skeptical that she's actually in control at all, like when she's under the influence of alcohol.
Yeah.
But
Like, is she addicted? Yeah. That's
Right,
the
is she
thing that comes to
addicted?
mind, right.
but then you could also say like she is then using it as an attempt to actually gain some sort of autonomy in some sort of roundabout way.
Yeah, that's what he says too. In bed, he says,
Well,
I mean,
I think she says it too. Yeah.
well, he says to
Yeah, I
throw
mean-
himself out of like. What is
yeah, I mean, he says
Oh,
he
a
says
kind of-
he'll drink alcohol, and she's like, "Well, why would you do that?" or whatever. And then he says, "In order to become the one."
I know
with,
that
like,
any
material
disorder
or whatever.
threatens my carefully thought out security system, she says. If it were like that, you wouldn't drink. I drink to work up the courage to throw my system out of order. What do you gain by doing that? I blow myself up. And what remains? A kind of ground meat from blood and nerves. It makes me resemble more closely the reality that surrounds me.
Yeah, and there's
Yeah.
something, and I think there's maybe something a little bit to be said about, how alcohol releases inhibitions, and then that could then release you from, the big other, or, I don't know the term to say it, superego, something like that.
It seems compatible to going to a brothel too,
The
or comparable.
the line when he says the like, one thing about this kind of like the big other or God or like whatever is in control, is that the film is not necessarily a exploration of that thing necessarily, which I don't know. What's common in Bergman films is like, I mean, in Winter Light specifically is what comes to mind, is that like it's explicitly talked about as God, like it's within a religious framework, and like I think in many Bergman films he refers to like the thing in control as God and the thing that the people are trying to understand as being God, versus like this is that thing is never explicitly talked about, and these people are much more like modern people or something like that, and that it's more of an explanation of their confusion at it's like their confusion without ever like acknowledging the thing in any kind of explicit terms or something, and like it puts it in a much more like scary, like enigmatic space than it would be if like you were to put it in within like a the religious framework that Bergman usually does. And then the last thing I want to say is that I like the back to the line or whatever where Tim says like love, drugs, alcohol, like none of these things. I like that these are all like things that are conceptually like graspable, like you can explain and talk about them, and some of them are more material, or like have, and like love has like a more material aspect or something like this, and that like that the thing that he's trying to take control back from or whatever of like these secret forces that like I mean they're all like the secret forces are somewhat like I mean they're like undefinable or something or unconceptualizable. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think, and like, you might say they're even like it's like the thing that underlies language. So like something once like God is a great but ultimately like lacking term, and I think what you said about his other films using God, I think that's totally correct. Where like God is used as the stand-in for what really is, I think, an examination of like the human subject's problems, like in the nature of subjectivity. I think it's actually less about ever like God, but rather like, and it's clearly not some like old fundamentalist idea of God or anything like that. It's more like this extreme unknowingness that exists in, a conscious or a subject or something like that. And yeah, and in those films, God, is labeled, and so there's something less scary about it. In this one, there's actually something very scary, and I think it is the fact that it's not named, and
Yeah.
that but ultimately, I do believe it's the thing that the thing that subtends language, the thing that's inherent to human subjectivity, the thing that's like that we really can't actually slap a label to or even talk about. We can only, or like we can talk around it, but we can't truly talk about it, and that's like that's like the big other.
Yeah, and I think just to insert like the Bergman's view or whatever in what he's like exploring through his films and trying to communicate, he says explicitly somewhere something along the lines of like I have become much less interested in this like relationship to God and much more interested in like the human relationship or something like that, which what I like about this film, and this film comes after a lot of like his heavy like God movies, and so but what I like about it is that it's like the concept that was in his earlier films as labeled as God is still present, but it's much more into the nitty gritty, much more ambiguous and harder to explain relationship aspect of these people as they deal with this overarching like undefinable concept.
Yeah, like, and this is at the same time in his career that I think he's either just or just after releases Cries and Whispers, which is, right, in my mind, a terrifying film, and really does the same thing, right? It's this very ambiguous and thus much scarier God, and I think this sense of like what these characters are experiencing, especially Peter, where this control and this sense of deterministic and this, where all these qualities that can be ascribed to this thing that they're in search of or sort of pondering and trying to investigate is like all characterizations that one would apply to, the intense anxiety experience. Like, when in that state, it's as if, you're contending with or at the mercy of, or the situation you find yourself in is very like this. Does this make sense? Like this impending doom, this, lack of control and fear and ineffability of what exactly it is, and yet it's so certainly the case. It's just, I don't know, like sort of like, investigation of what is so scary about this thing and some type of lingering anxiety.
And it's definitely not hell. It's not like it's not hell that people are scared of. Instead, it is the ambiguity. It is like the aim. It's a very modern conundrum, right? Very like it. His movies are like, and every time he uses God, like I've never ever seen a Bergman film and actually thought it was. It's not about like. It's not. I've never felt like they're about faith or about like some traditional idea of God. It's always about a subject's relation to uncertainty. Like that is, and that's like a very modern issue. And that like comes from the lack of truly like institutionalized and adopted faith structures and things like that. That's in like, so in some sense, like Bergman is a very modern movie maker and
super modern, like in the technical sense.
Right. Well, I also I mean
I know you mean like contemporary, right?
Well, no, I mean modern in the sense that a post-God world.
Yeah, like
A
sort of
post-God human subject.
like the classic existential dilemma.
Something like that, right?
Yeah.
And I think this movie gets it. I think this movie presents a case where it's that thing. I think this movie gets at it better than his other movies because it doesn't use the term God. But that's not to say that you can't get at it very well with his other movies and God, but that there's something like especially like elusive about like the problem in this movie. Like I think the whole time I'm like, I'm like, what the like there is no like it's so weird because there is no like problem. There's no like
Yeah.
actual conflict,
Just
and
the
yet
human
things
problem.
are so bad,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's like a very
And it's like these. So you know how we were talking about like all these people or whatever, like the guy who comes over and is the audience or whatever after he tries to commit suicide or might commit suicide or whatever. Like everybody's kind of like denying of like his subjectivity. What they're also denying is this is the problem and how it relates to the ambiguity that is causing it or whatever, and that like everybody's kind of like signed on to the this like whatever their kind of like analytic model or whatever is to model this ambiguity and
right.
We could circle back around to like the psychiatrist his like final diagnosis or whatever.
It's almost
exactly.
It's almost like the impetus for Seventh Continent, where, like, Hanukkah reads about the newspaper where this family, did this huge ritual and committed suicide, and like the thing just says, oh, they were like, gives some kind of like 2 sentence explanation, and he's like, what? In the same way, like no one almost kills themselves because they can't get hard in bed, like and yet like it's like everyone in the film has this sort of blind spot when it comes to like the existential anxiety of like the human condition, except for Peter, who can't seem to tell anyone about it.
And Peter's hope to escape is the exact same as the Seventh Continent.
Yeah,
his goal is to enter the material, right? As the family wanted to dissolve into the material.
And I think there's also like something to be said about even the incompetence of the psychiatrist's answer to all of these problems as well,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think clearly like his explanation is compelling because it doesn't acknowledge the ambiguity.
Yeah, well, I think his explanation's obviously fundamentally flawed in this aspect you just said. Tim's solution is to have, his hope was that he could obtain Peter. Katerina's hope was that she could obtain Peter. Peter thinks that he might just dissolve into the world, and the psychoanalyst like provides this like really lame explanation. He doesn't really provide a solution, although he does say earlier on like I could wipe away your identity, and that is in some sense what he wants. What Peter ultimately desires is to enter the material or something like that. So in some sense, I guess he does posit a solution, but each solution seems like it ultimately is like we as spectators know that none of these solutions are actually viable, and they all seem like a bad,
and like all of them seem like effectively the same as like dying, really, to either remove the self, literally kill yourself, and then even in jail, like he isn't really much of anything in that place.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Is like with all of this in mind, like what does Peter become? Like the final shot is of like this teddy bear or something, and he's like, he's like reduced to something. And like in that, it's like obviously like childlike, which takes us back to kind of like Tim's whole. I see like the child in myself, or like I am a child and I feel like a child, and then I open my eyes and there's like an incompatibility and two incompatibles and stuff. So I don't know if there's like. I think there's obviously some kind of thematic connection there, and with what Peter kind of becomes in the psych ward. But I don't know what does Peter ultimately become within this kind of framework we've built.
I'm not exactly sure. I do want to comment on the chess as some kind of coming back to his explicate, like him telling Katerina, like, we chose a game, like we committed to a game whose rules we didn't understand and we aren't good at playing it, and like we're cheated, which is honestly kind of a good like analogy for the general situation, not just for the relationship, but like,
Of course, yeah.
right, just like for life in general or something. And chess is like a game in which the rules are extremely well defined, and he can now focus on a game of a much more material, simple level, like the world he wants to inhabit. The teddy bear, I don't know if I'm looking into it, but he kind of holds the crotch of the teddy bear, just as a note. But also in Katerina, I feel like the ending, just if we're talking about the ending, like I feel like she ends up in a sort of tragic situation in which, she's telling the mother, and they have this little back and forth, and she says something along the lines of like, I feel like now I understand him, like now, like I feel like I'm finally alive and I understand what he's going through. And so in some sense you want to say, okay, yeah, now you're in, now like all these, emotional pseudo-social structures have been like, wiped away, and now you're this animal in this world, like Peter felt like. But at the same time, this like sense of understanding Peter, whether he's in psych, like just before he was in the psych ward, can never be confirmed or communicated, or so
Right.
It's like, is she deluded? Does she actually get it?
That the last thing you said actually makes it even, it's even stronger to her point that she understands more, so that she can communicate.
Yeah.
And we also see the shot, she's, instead of him who several times is looking through something at her at her as wife, instead she is looking through the window frame at her husband. And so there is some sort of like swapping of roles, or at least an adoption of a similar role that and she used to, I don't know, maybe romance was her game and she was playing it really seriously, and he used to be involved in that to some degree. But it was more like he wanted to not be involved, and he would watch her from a distance, and he was always like more apathetic relative to her in terms of the relationship, I think. And now that he is the one playing a game, the game may be like in this sense analogous to the romance. She can now watch how he's invested in this game, this very material game, this very obvious game, in a way that he was observing her interested in the romance that he wasn't necessarily. Chaotic romance.
Yeah, I think this is a great success story for Peter, in that he has communicated. He's done it. No, I'm not
because she says that she understands
being
him.
Success, but like this has been, this is like, what is it? Is it Hegel's alienation theory or something? Like, it's this. Yeah, I'm not about to expound on Hegel, but like, not that I could, but he it's this huge compounding, pressurizing moment until he finally communicates in a seemingly appropriate way to the topic. And it seems like, I mean, I agree with Steven. It seems like he has succeeded. I mean, at what cost, but
right.
I mean, I think he has communicated.
Yeah, because and that he's communicated because she says that she finally like totally understands him or something like that. And when she's watching him, like she says that she finally understands and can explain Peter Eggerman or something like that. I think as far as like this like whole like expression idea or whatever and communication, I love like when he's talking about the dream and he says something like that when he has this dream, it's like the only time that he feels that he totally has obtained life or something like that, or like has that, as well as he says that like
what I experienced, I can read it if you want.
No, go ahead.
What I experienced seemed more real and more terrifying than the gray reality of my everyday life.
But then he says it's like a cliche, right?
Yeah, he does say something where he feels like he has conquered it.
I think it's at the end.
Okay, I'm scrolling, but you can talk. I'll let you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was just saying, like, I like that.
We got 10 minutes until the 2-hour mark.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Dude, the dream is so good, and just like the Psychiatrist, we have given a substandard summary. Audience, you gotta watch the movie. There's zero chance anyone hears this without having seen it. or at least this far.
Yeah,
Oh, here we
because
go.
It's only us who's
Or
gonna
what?
listen
Here,
to it.
do I? Okay, so he just finished telling his story, and then he's looking into the camera. In the letter he says, "Can you help me? Is there any help? Can I live on? Do I live at all? Or was that dream, as it was, my only short moment of life, of truly experienced and conquered reality?" And this
Yeah.
is mirrored by after he's done the deed, and she's at the mom's house, and she says, this is the true reality. Like now she lives in this like weird space.
We haven't even talked about the mom,
Yeah,
which
who
is
cares,
disappointing
bro?
because I
She's
love
also-
that she's
I know,
like, I
she's
love
so
my
cute.
house.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
so
yeah.
I wanna
sad.
talk a little bit about that too.
And she's
Oh.
like a famous. Well, we could be brief, I guess. She was an actress, and that's why it was important to Peter to have that dinner or whatever. Is not because he tries to explain. He's like, it's not because of some mommy something. It's like all the business. She's a relic. She's like an icon of the time, and it's good for business. Or something.
She reminded me of that woman. Have you seen? Do I have this right? Sunset Boulevard. No,
Haven't
that's
seen
not
it. Need to.
There's another movie where there's an old actress who's like living in this old house that
Magnolia.
she refuses to let go of. I don't think it's Magnolia. No,
This
it's
is just
it's
moms,
some
dude.
it's some like 50s noir film. I don't know.
More like every woman in her 50s.
Right.
Just kidding. Okay, well, does anyone have any quick thing you want to say about the mom? Otherwise, we should wrap it up.
I personally don't have much to say, and I've got to pee.
Okay, so
Me
we'll be
too.
brief. Okay, so real quick before we do. Okay, fine. We'll do concluding remarks. We'll do our scores and everything. But I want to posit the question of like, we need to have a separate podcast for a couple things, but mainly, we need to have this evil film discussion because speaking of Elsmore,
Yeah, Elsmore's going crazy talking about it.
is Elsmore not wrong? What would he say the other day? Oh, big surprise! The guy's
Yeah,
watching
let's
a movie that takes place. Oh, the
strawman
modern
him.
world alienates a character, and they feel doom and gloom, or something like this. But and I've had a similar just these. I feel like these films, and it's worth mentioning Bergman in general, but like, are really life affirming, in a way. But it's and it's related to this this sort of unframed God concept or something. But anyway, is this movie like, is it a black pill? Is it a white pill? Is it is this just a brief comment on like is this evil or is this whatever? Does that make sense? Like, are you supposed to walk
Yeah.
away with some like, oh, communication is futile and I should kill a prostitute, or type of thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't. I can understand what Elsmore means. I think intuitively by evil, and I think that this movie falls into that category, but that's okay. It can still be a great I do see it as relatively doom and gloom, but at the same time honest and not positing some like impossibility, but rather describing.
Yeah,
And
That's what makes it good, is that it's not just saying life is futile in some cliche way. Instead, it's like it's outlining like a very serious issue.
Yeah,
that
that's
everybody
why-
should take seriously.
Yeah, and
that's
I
why
think
it's a
there-
white
I-
pill
sorry,
instead of a
go, John.
black pill. No, it's just that's why it's a white pill instead of a black pill. Like it's not prescribing that like any kind of mode of action. Like it's if anything, it's like this is like the overarching problem of human communication, or like the problem of defining the problem or something like that.
Yeah.
And to be aware of it, to not be aware of it or not to consider it is not good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I think
I-
it's relatable. Sorry.
I definitely don't get any sort of life affirming vibes from it, especially since it doesn't posit any solution, rather outlines a problem. And I think there is something to be said about Elsmore's like faux criticism of, oh look, another movie about the human condition or whatever. And I think a lot of like artsy, in quotations, films sort of fall under this category. And I think it's reasonable to be like kind of over that, but or see that as like you're getting worn out by that sort of motif. But I don't ever really feel that way about these types of movies in general.
Yeah,
Especially
we
when they're done well.
definitely. Yeah, we need to get Elsewhere on. We need to have an evil. We have those because he obviously will disagree with whatever this conception of what he thinks. But
I think he'll agree with like my conception, and I think he might agree with yours if you just I don't know, maybe you'd have to say it better. But like Elsmore, I can totally understand like his disinterest. Ultimately, I think is like an aesthetic one, and he's tired of, in a broad sense, and he's tired of watching something which doesn't posit a solution and is not life affirming. I agree that this is not like life affirming, but I still think it's a good movie and like one should watch.
Mm-hmm.
I agree it leans towards evil, but like I think that affects Elsmore more emotionally. Like I think he dislikes it more. He dislikes that aesthetic more.
yeah, I mean, I've talked to him recently. We were just talking about it. We gotta
Heaven
have a
filled.
thing for it. But yeah,
We were approaching 2 hours fast, by the way.
It's all right. He's got this kind of like We'll clarify. What
Yeah, we might want to cut all of this out.
I feel like utility is somehow baked into this.
Well, we're talking about
isn't it
Elsmore
rude to
without him
talk
here.
about
That's
Elsmore?
really
Yeah, I don't know.
continuing this conversation. I don't think is good.
We will not continue it, but we're not cutting it out.
Okay, you can't cut out me saying that perhaps we
I'm not
should cut it
editing
out.
anything out. Whatever. Okay, so all right, scores, thoughts. I will start. I'll give it a strong 4. I think it is in a sense life affirming, and I think worthwhile positing the question like what could they have done? Was it salvageable? And if you think yes, then it's like this kind of fundamental disagreement with the Marionettes idea, and I think they could have saved it. I think it's a very useful investigation of an issue.
How did we go this whole podcast without you talking about that? Jesus Christ!
I think it's a useful investigation of an issue that I find relatable and see in my own life, and like it's not about to go away. So I'm giving it a 4.
I'll give it 4.2. I mean, yeah, I think it's like a very nuanced and it's a very nuanced, very well put together description of an overarching problem that I think that people don't like to acknowledge or don't acknowledge. I mean, and this is like discussed in the film, but I think is critical to be aware of and think about, and yeah.
This movie gets a 1.1. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I was about to cry.
No, I think I will give this movie. I think coming into this, I was probably going to give it like a 3.4, 3.3.
Mm.
I think after talking about it, it's a movie that I'm enjoying more, and I like it a lot more. I have a soft spot for it now. I'm gonna give it a 3.8.
Okay.
Yeah,
Brody,
this
I don't know if
conversation definitely made me like the movie a lot more. I feel a little bit bad for my first comments, but also I don't. 3.9 is my score.
Ooh.
What reduces it is that I was mostly entertained and continue to be entertained throughout the movie on a conceptual level, but not on a visceral level. So I can sort of imagine the person who isn't super in love with these like ideas and
Ideas guy.
yeah, not an ideas guy, that they would have a hard time really loving this movie because I think it lacks something on a visceral level, on a narrative level. That's it.
Yeah, I think a lot of the critiques, like if you look it up or whatever, like it's not a loved film, and I think people feel like narratively it's a little too loose, but it gets me going, baby. All right, well, sounds good. All right, cool.
Stay tuned. We may be doing a book club podcast.
Oh yeah, we've got a new.
If any of the listeners want to listen along, we're reading Gravity's Rainbow.
meme. Memeity's Memebo.
Right.
Bananas Rainbow.
We're reading Gravity's Rainbow, 100 pages a week. You've got time. You can jump in on this session.
I'm only 15 pages in.
The first meeting,
haven't bought the
aka
book
the
yet.
first podcast that you shithead viewers can listen to, is something like next Friday. That is February 5th, February
Yeah.
6th, or February 7th.
Yeah, we will release a the podcast will be titled accordingly, and
you can read along, and it'll be an ongoing thing because
Yeah.
we're going to be reading the book for a while.
International Book Club activated.
Yeah.
And hopefully evil podcast coming soon.
Okay.
All right, bye-bye.
Podcast over now.